welcome. This is Poetry of Immigrants, and I am Frank Crowley, your host. It is December 27th, and as you see, winter is here in all of its wonderful beauty. We have the American flag, and also I have here a seat representing the missing soldier in Vietnam. And some poetry will come out actually from his point of view. And I may switch seats to make the effect. Thank you for joining us. We've been on 3 years, and we're so happy you're our viewers, and we want to continue. I usually open with a little invocation, and I'd like to read from Anna Quinlan, who writes inspirational pieces to keep us hopeful in a season like this. Today's show is dedicated to all the grandparents and grandchildren, especially the grandparents who are actually taking major care, nurturing their young grandkids. And it's also a show about life and death, war and peace. And I think most of all, it's a show about the spiritual quality of the moving poetry that you'll read and hear. So, get a life in which you are generous. Look around at the azaleas making fuchsia starbursts in spring. Look at the full moon hanging silver in a black sky on a cold night, and realize that life is glorious and that you have no business taking it for granted. Care so deeply about its goodness that you want to spread it around. Take the money you would have spent on beers in a bar and give it to charity. Work in a soup kitchen. Tutor a 7th grader. All of us want to do well, but if we do not do good too, then doing well will never be enough. That addresses the hole that some of us feel on the holiday. And this is a wonderful antidote to that. I also want to play with an additional definition of poetry. Last time when Jim was here playing his guitar, I happened to mention Robert Frost's definition of poetry. A momentary stay in confusion, end quote. And Jim said, yeah, that's Frost, all right, it sure is. Succinct, to the point, pithy. This I ran across from one of my friends, and it struck me. Quote, poetry is a constructed conversation on the frontier of dreaming. It is a mechanism by which the essential state of reverie can be made available to our conscious minds. Poems make possible a conscious entry into the preconscious mind, a lucid dreaming, end quote. New York Times Book Review, Sunday, August 6, 2017. That sounds Jungian to me. Yeah, archetypes, the occult and the spiritual quality lurking in the unconscious mind. So, let's dive in. The first group I'd like to recognize are all our forebears, our immigrants, our grandmothers and grandparents and grandfathers and extended family who came from the old country. After all, most of us are just really first, second, or third generation, some fourth. But if we take a moment of grace, a prayer for refugees, it gives us the perspective we need to realize that we are descendants of the immigrants. God of our wandering ancestors, long have we known that your heart is with the refugee, that you were born into time in a family of refugees fleeing violence in their homeland, who then gathered up their hungry child and fled into alien country. Reference to Joseph, Mary, and the Christ child. That's a good literary allusion. Their cry, your cry, resounds through the ages. Quote, "Will you let me in?" End quote. Give us hearts that break open when our brothers and sisters turn to us with the same cry. Then surely all these things will follow. Ears will no longer turn deaf to their voices. Eyes will see a moment for grace instead of a threat. Tongues will not be silenced, but will instead advocate. And hands will reach out, working for peace in their homeland, working for justice in the lands where they seek safe haven. Lord, protect all refugees in their travels. May they find a friend in me, and so make me worthy of the refuge I have found in you. Prayer courtesy of Catholic Relief Services. I am just back from Douglas, Arizona, a border town, and I did actually cross the border with dear friends who drove us with a truck full of blankets, children's hats, mittens, gloves, everything needed in the cold. And we delivered them by just stepping over the border into Mexico and being received by the Migrant Resource Center run by the Presbyterian Church. It's the first time I've been to Mexico, first time I've been over the border. And it left a pretty powerful, indelible impression on me in terms of the little children who were under a plastic tarp, actually. About 20 children nestled up against one of the walls, actually leading to the border crossing. And we only spent 2 hours, but as we crossed back, I realized I felt motivated. So I'm going to follow through with sponsoring a family. As Gemma and the 10 ladies from Guilford who were on our show, number 32, after they came back from Arizona's crossing in Nogales. And of course, we had a full show on that. So I'd like to start by switching into 50 years ago today. And where were you? December 27th, 1969. That's, of course, when the Vietnam War was really getting ramped up. Flashback to 1950s and the French pulling out of Vietnam, and then the U.S. getting involved, and then Kennedy picking up where the French left. And he was really somehow involved in a deep way. So I guess we can really realize that our involvement in Vietnam was 1960 up to 75, through all the trouble and turmoil and suffering. This is a marvelous book, by the way. Vietnam, a History, Stanley Karnoff, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. It's in the Westbrook Library. Incoming. Poems by Vietnam veterans. Confession. You come to confess your sins. You, Father, I shot and killed a man. Yes, go on, my son. I killed him. When? During the war. This man, was he a soldier? Yes, Father. An enemy soldier? You were a soldier? Yes, Father. During the war, in battle? Yes, Father. Those things happened. Do you have other sins to confess? Before the Lord? No, Father. No, Father. How are you with yourself? I'm not sure I understand. Do you touch yourself? What, Father? Do you touch, masturbate? Yes. Let us pray for forgiveness. How sad is that? How ironically horrible. And that's another aspect of organized religion. This is from the point of view of a Vietnam soldier who's trying to find some expiation for what he considers a terrible sin. I guess doctrine doesn't cut it. John Wayne. This is the cowboy, of course, who was such a hero in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I think because he took no prisoners. John Wayne, not back then, not back there, back in the jungle, in the thick of battle, when I drew a bead upon your silhouette, centered dead in my sights. But now, years later, as I walk with my dog through the forest, autumn-colored, peaceful and quiet, I wonder, had you ever heard of John Wayne? And who do you want to be when if you had grown up? The moment I squeezed the trigger and your silhouette dropped from sight, I haven't forgotten you, haven't known who I am, not since I became John Wayne. Obviously, the Vietnam vets have a great command of irony, also dramatic irony, but bitter irony. These voices are bitter and sad, broken, looking for support. I was never told. I am stuffed in bed like a 40-year-old crab, face pressed hard to the mattress so I can see nighttime Alaska sky, green lights hanging like sheets on a clothesline, amplified through bed springs. I hear breathing, tense muscles, absent-minded drum of my fingers, the fingers of a 16-year-old lying face down on an old green hammock, sweating in close Pennsylvania heat, hearing some unknown Sousa on the taut canvas, eyes closed to see a man, a patriotic man, marching off to Vietnam and fully expecting to die. 53,000. No, sorry, 58,000. 58,000 names on the Vietnam Vets Memorial in Washington. Oh, my fallen brother. To my fallen brother, may he ride the winds soaring through the heavens with his newfound pair of wings. He was fighting ghosts from Nam. He knew no peace or calm. He encountered hardships and strife, just trying to live his life. One day he pulled a gun and wouldn't put it down. The police shot him. He lay dead on the ground. Someday God will wipe tears from his eyes. Joe didn't know it was okay to cry. How many brothers have died like Joe? There are no statistics. I guess we'll never know. PTSD, haunting, crippling, inhibiting. I think of all the books in the Westbrook Library containing poetry from the Vietnam years by our soldiers, but also our nurses who took care of them. Through these eyes hold the truth of this infliction. Upon brow sedated in fury and fire, where fireballs scorch jungle floor, and embrace boscage in rage, where eyes enhance stigma in premeditated enigma, enkindled to sting eyes beholding error of inflicted. The thing that strikes me about the Vietnam vets who returned to write poetry is that they really came back fired up and inspired and somehow gained the skills, the language in which to express their deep feelings. This book is so impressive. Incoming, and there's a metal image of a Purple Heart on the cover there. Poems by Vietnam vets. We have some poems also by Vietnam soldiers, people stuck in the middle of the conflict, suffering from the war. The thing about both sides, which through the naming of names denigrated the other, but also dehumanized. Gooks and grunts, actually. Gooks and grunts and gooks. Who's who? Vietnam, Robert C. Hahn. He's a soldier who served and came back. Land of volcanic hills, time-warped mountains, lichened rivers and rain-scented heat. Land of rice, palms and poverty, patience, struggle, and violence. Land of war, land of silence. Proud people whose ravished children speak the beggar's tongue, whose girls whore the invader, whose men salute the rapist. At night, hunt the rabid beast. Enslaved in the name of freedom, you watch invader kill invader. You watch your children die. Watch the others speak of peace. Suffer sorrows without cease. A little breather emotionally from that, which after 5 or 6 books gets really, really heavy on the shoulders. Where were you December 27th, 1969? Easter of 68. I have seen the Pascal men today, long past rising to a passion. They sucked their last sun through blued lips, buttressed their intestines in handfuls. Lifting their wounds to the sky, they fell silent as the sun, as words not spoken. Broken Easters of flesh, girdled in fatigue strips, red-arching rainbows of dead men rising like a promise to give Jesus the big kiss and sinking down. Only my breath on their lips, only my words in their mouth. Bedtime story. This one drips with irony. Sleep, America. Silence is a warm bed. Sleep your nightmares of small cries cut open now in the secret places of Black Land, Bamboo City. Sleep tight, America. Dog tags eating, sweat grimaced. TV people, 5 o'clock news. My son, the meat. Laughing scars, huh? Novocaine fist. Squeeze every window empty, then hum. Fear only the natural unreality and kiss nostalgia goodbye. Bayonet teddy bear and snore. Bad dreams are something you ate. So sleep, you mother. Carrying the Darkness, the poetry of the Vietnam War, edited by W.D. Earhart. Christopher Bursk, lies. My son and I kissed the same woman goodbye. We are meeting thousands in the dark of the capital. This is the first lie, that I wish to bring peace to anyone besides those with me now in the lamp's small territory. What a great image that is, the lamp's small territory. It's the light curtailed by the small lamp, which only shows a little spotlight. Soon we'll be marching down a wide street ending in flags and marble and dawn, huge and official, turning the white stone glistening. We shade our eyes, march into the dazzle, as if light were another kind of government. Yes, I remember the marches. 69, 70. Wow. Nixon pulled all the stops out in his passion to continue the war. This is the second lie, that the men inside the building hate the light, have been hurt so deeply that they have the world hurt. With them, my father, my brother, gentle, considerate men. And though I love them, I rise with others against them. He's joining the Vietnam March and probably wearing a jacket like that. My boy and I welcome the sun on the backs of our necks. We need it there as we walk into the darkness between buildings. The police wait for us. What a repression came down on their heads as the Vietnam vets came back and began to protest our involvement in the war. Soon they'll raise their arms and bring down the shadows we expect. This is the fourth lie, that these men like to wield the darkness. The fifth lie, that they have not chosen to. Mother and wife, the person we love most in the world, has sent instructions. Keep away from the violence. This is the sixth lie, that we can. The seventh, that we wish to. We move closer to the damage, lurk in the shade as if hearing the screams, seeing the blood. We might understand. The eighth lie is that we do. We thought by walking in great sunlit masses before those who began this war, we might end it. The protests somehow stiffened Nixon's resolve even more. What a horrible, horrible situation. We lift the sun in our hands as if to show the men in small groups gathering at the windows. There is another government. The ninth lie is that they do not know this, are not grateful like us for free passage on the earth, the sun's generosity. The 10th lie is the hardest. that we are in no danger from these men, that you are in no danger, my son, from the faithful, the earnest, from friend, brother, or father. Witness Kent State. Protest on campus ended in the killing, the murder of 3 on campus. Marilyn Butler. She said she would marry him if he would catch hold of the sunflowers growing in the field, if he would yield to the pain of their being uprooted in his hands, if he would lift them with his words, with strands of beads becoming words. Quote, "Forgive me the bright green fronds," end quote, he answered, "the bare skin and veins of my hands. I will pick the flowers with the yellow eyes, the lifted lips. My face is rough with scars if I press you against it. I suppose you can tell me what I do not see myself. Who is the equal of anyone? Come, we will run together. Whatever we catch, that is the reason why we are here. How do you wish to live now that you've returned?" And they both paused, listening. Of course, the Vietnam vets returning had brought on their backs a huge, huge metaphorical sack of nightmares, horrible memories, shocks to their system. How do you wish to live now that you've returned? And they both paused, listening. Well, certainly not as homeless, certainly not as rejected, and certainly not in a society that was pretending to care. I'm going to read just one quote, and then we're going to take a 3-minute break. This is the context for it all. Again, Vietnam, a History, Stanley Carnoff. George Ball, the Deputy Secretary of State, was playing golf at a Washington club, and Harriman and Hillsman drove up just as he had completed the 9th hole. Ball took them to his house to study the message. He favored its firmness, but insisted that it be cleared with President Kennedy, who was spending the weekend in Hyannisport at his Cape Cod estate. It has never been established whether Kennedy received the text by teletype, as Hillsman had claimed, or was merely read the relevant passages over the telephone. Kennedy could not have assumed that all his advisors had approved the cable, as his brother Robert recalled, since he endorsed it on condition that Ball get the concurrence of Secretary of State Dean Rusk. Remember him? And of Roswell Gilpatrick, all the president's men. The Deputy Secretary of Defense acting for McNamara, who was on vacation. The boys in government and business were enjoying their weekend while our sons were dying a horrible death in Vietnam. Most probably Kennedy was not paying close attention on that summer weekend. The moral? McGeorge Bundy, remember that name? Later summed up the lesson of the improvised process. Vietnam was an improvised process? Quote, never do business on the weekend, but is ever thus that old men send the young into the mouth, the maw, the teeth of the Dragon of War. Thank you for listening. We'll take a short break, and we'll return.
Valley Shore Community Television is constantly adapting to the demands of our viewers. Busy schedules are making it hard for viewers to watch shows when they air.
Television has changed dramatically. We don't have to be appointment viewers or listeners anymore.
No.
We can do this in real time.
VSC TV has made it easy to watch all our locally produced content online and when you want it. Visit vsctv.com and click on the Watch Online tab to watch live, or visit our local show playlist to easily navigate your favorite shows anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
This world is for free. Freedom from the waves of this world.
VSC TV is your local Connecticut Mid-Shore Valley digital connection.
Get it. Get it.
Get it.
Get it. Get it.
Is she gonna get it, Daddy?
She'll get it. Get it. Get it.
When you bring home a Goodwill find, you give your whole town a reason to celebrate because you're also funding local job training and placement programs in tech, healthcare, and more. Goodwill. Bring good home.
Hi, I'm Kelly. It is my job to teach employees the responsible way to sell both tobacco and electronic cigarettes. As of October 1st, 2019, a customer must be at least 21 years old to purchase a tobacco product or an electronic cigarette. The law also says all employees must card anyone who appears to be under the age of 30 years old. The free updated prevention education program will be available on October 1st, 2019 at cttobaccotraining.com.
Community TV, your neighborhood TV.
Publicly funded and a reliable partner for cable companies nationwide. It provides transparent coverage of local and state government, education, and public programming.
A digital town green that can be watched anywhere, anytime, and on any device.
Watch us on today's high-tech distribution methods.
Community TV in Connecticut.
Local,
unfiltered,
reliable, and yours.
I never served in Vietnam. I actually had a strange experience volunteering to be in the Air Force in 1965 after I graduated from Fairfield University in 64. I went in to enlist, and I went through a battery of tests. I think I would have made a great navigator. Great eyes, they said. So I thought, oh, okay, 65, better to enlist than be, drafted in. And because of the uncertainty of what was happening, I thought, yeah. So I went in, and about an hour and a half later, in the courthouse where I had the interview on Hartford's Main Street, I walked out. And I walked out because I was 4F. What? At the very bottom of the form, and it was a long form, was the question, the very last question, which required a check or no check. Have you ever had any homosexual experiences? Uh-oh. What to do? On a dilemma. On the one hand, obviously, don't want to be drafted. On the other hand, no. I have lived my life honestly up to this point, and, God's grace is always there. Yes. Oh, they stiffened, they sat back, and they were losing a pilot. And there, but for the grace of God, go I. Probably like 68 or 9 after training, bam, out of the sky. Like so many American pilots who ended up in Vietnam in the war camps. So I thought, well, I escaped that bullet, or maybe more than one bullet. So I sit here with a protest jacket on, the way the Vietnam returning vets who made it back would actually march down to the Washington Monument in that protest we were reading about. So I certainly don't want to, in a sense, impersonate. I want to honor and respect and recall those vets who did come back and were so angry of what they had been told in the poem about the 10 lies and the whole situation of planning for the war being done in a haphazard way on a weekend. Kennedy was at his compound. What is it? What is it in the human heart, the human spirit, that wants to continue this madness and to cover up the reasons that things happen the way they do? So they had a right to be furious. And I want to give voice to some of their anger and fury. This book, Carrying the Darkness, the poetry of the Vietnam War, has a signature poem in here, as most collections do. They take the name, the title of one poem, and give it to the book. So, Carrying the Darkness. After the consensus has returned, after the memories of Kent and My Lai and Hiroshima lose their power and their connections with each other, and the sweaters labeled Made in Taiwan, after the last American dies in Canada and the last Korean in prison and the last Indian at Pine Ridge, after the last whale is emptied from the sea and the last leopard emptied from its skin and the last drop of blood refined by Exxon, after the last iron door clangs shut behind the last conscience, and the last loaf of bread is hammered into bullets, and the bullets scattered among the hungry, what answers will you find? What armor will protect you when your children ask you, why? Floating petals, Jan Barry. See, here the bougainvillea. There the cactus and palm. Here the lotus flower. There the bomb-shattered bamboo of Vietnam. Severed flowers, sharded fronds, floating in shrapnel, sealed in napalm. Green hell, green death. Green hell of the jungle, green fire, green death, green ghosts, green grim bodies. Green jungle all around, hot, full of death, firefox, foxfire, floating ghosts, ghosts of the quick and the dead. Green hell, green bodies, the living from pallor and dirt, the dying from gasping breath, the dead from blood-drained wounds, all in green uniforms. Other green bodies, hidden in the green jungle in green camouflage and green branches and twigs, green leaves covering quick green limbs. Green hell, green jungle, green bodies, green leaves stalking, green uniforms hunting, green limbs in the growth of the ghost jungle, green ghosts flitting through green trees, green fire from green fingers on green guns. Green jungle, green hellfire, green death. Harvest moon, pumpkins, crooked grins. On Halloween window ledges hide candle flames of bamboo villages. Glowing behind the orange, decapitated skulls of Asians, staring at shouting, masked children dressed as little spirits of pirates, waving drooping bags of loot in wild night chases, with soldiers, pilgrims, witches, skeleton cowboys, and revived, quote, Indians. Here where our farms and towns, factories and cities and highways lie, the civilization that we buried rise with the harvest moon. On a city sidewalk, gangs of stick-armed tricksters steal candy from younger ones. Across a quiet village street, a spinster's favorite privy spills. While down the road, small shapes scatter from a farm as a field of hay grows up in flames. Lessons. What's a patriot, Dad? Hey, Dad. Earth to Dad. Get your nose out of your newspaper. Help me with my homework. What's a patriot, Dad? Well, I guess a person who loves the land. Although some people act as if a patriot's a man who hates another land. Hey, Dad, don't give me a lecture. All I need's a word, just a word. What's a veteran, Dad? Hey, Dad, Dad. I love that Earth to Dad. A veteran's what your father is. His mother chimed in clear across the room. Oh, I got it. Somebody who's always out of work. Home with us, kids. Huh, Dad? Is that what a veteran is? Yep. Dad got out, remembering suddenly the time his youngest son had stopped breathing right here on the kitchen table with this oldest son screaming, "Nicky's dead! Nicky's dead!" and the frantic fight to find a sign of life while dialing the emergency number for an ambulance. What's war, Dad? You know, Dad, war. Dad, what the hell's war? An old dad blurted out, still thinking of the desperate battle, one desperate night, to save the baby's life. 10 minutes of terror after 20 years of anticipation. And then 20 years of worrying when it's going to happen again. R.L. Barth, The Insert. Our view of sky, jungle, and fields constricts into a sinkhole covered with sawgrass, undulating soon whipped slant as the chopper hovers at 4 feet. Wrapped, boot deep in slime, we deploy ourselves in loose perimeter, listening for incoming rockets above the thump of rotor blades, edgy for contact, junkies of terror, impatient to shoot up. Nothing moves, nothing sounds. Then, single file, we move across a stream bed toward high ground. The terror of the inserts quickly over, too quickly, and more quickly every time. So, single insert is when a cadre of troops are dropped the 4-foot high over the grass hovering of the helicopter as quickly as possible. So we're on to May 1970. 13 faces waiting to be born and nothing to say on this Monday morning. The school's closed, rain, the new killing. What do the crickets hear when I lie down on them in the grass, my hands sinking? I'd go to Jesus Christ like Irina, the woman from the Hotel Madrid in Babel's story, who was knocked up and beaten across the belly with a belt by Soroyaga, the janitor. I'd talk to God like she did and hear him say, "You cannot kiss your own ear," and be turned into an angel with wings made from the size of babies. I'd fuck the father of my child until he smothered and Christ cursed me for killing one of his angels. I'd make Christ weep for me like she did if I could bring us back. Because who else does this kind of thing? Who else needs to be forgiven? This morning we decided to list our bad dreams in a letter to Nixon. Dear Mother, we don't like these dreams. We can't stand them. We know you caused them. We want you to take them back. Signed 13 students without wings who have arms that don't lift, feet that lie flat on the ground and freeze, hands that tremble and go nowhere, lips as tender as the passages of birth, anger and the snapping of wings. I'd put my mouth against theirs, but they don't breathe. And it goes on like this. I'd lift each skirt and let my head slide back in like disciples who worship revelation in the mother, asking, is this the wound? Is this the birth canal? Wow. That's a punch in the gut. That's quite a poem. Stephen Berg. I'd like to read a poem from a Vietnamese talking about her own homeland, which she loves dearly, even through the destruction. I love this place. I love the climate, the perfume of the land, the wild grass echoing, the rainy season's first thunder. I love this place. I love its faraway wind whispering in my ear like grandmother's voice, full of legends, the broad wind, the long wind, so immense across a plain stripped of houses. But the river still flows gently like a folk song. The tide runs out towards the city. I love this place where the water reflects the sun. Oh, An Phu village, how beautiful is my love. Ha Phuong, written in a Cuchi Tunnel, 1974. Translated by Phan Than Hao with Lady Borton. living in tunnels. I actually was so deeply moved by Gemma Matheson's show with the ladies from Guilford that it stayed with me. And mornings I tend to go hang out at a cafe, preferably one with a view of the water, whether it's the tidelands or the ocean. And that's where inspiration comes to me. More important, though, it's in the morning. Unfortunately, with PTSD, those people are traumatized and relive the horrors of the war through their own dreams. And that's what we started with as a definition for today's poetry, a useful definition. There are millions of definitions, but that one, I thought, rang a bell for PTSD sufferers. The thing about nightmares is that they never end, especially those from war, which causes PTSD. It's the thing that lasts forever. They may be home, the Vietnam vets who returned, but they brought that metaphorical sack on their backs of suffering for a lifetime. Why, Dad? Why? What a wonderful question at the end of that poem. I think healing is possible. I hear from my good friend Woody Wilkins through woodworking for the Vietnam vets. He works with them as a volunteer. I hear they're actually doing things in the maternity ward, that is, the vets are giving back, are somehow healing through giving and volunteering. That makes sense to me. But it also dovetails with that wonderful definition of poetry as precursor to dream, but also at the preconscious level. Something's moving deeply spiritually in there, so that healing is a human, reliable condition to save everyone, if you let it. Other people's grandchildren. So at its place in my reverie, started with honoring grandparents. Just as sweet and lovable I find at Ed's place this morning, with squeals of joy on the swings next to picnic tables where doting grandpas and mas sit nearby as the diaper-dragging toddlers, buggy boarders, sassy siblings on close blankets at Hammonasset Beach State Park, just as eager to feed the sparrows and the yellow sharp-eyed seagulls hovering at Ed's and at Meg's Point, just as ecstatic to coax Grandpa into the briny surf at water's edge and then splash him from behind, just as huggable as my own bumpkins, just as needy for affection and attention from Grandma, keeping a sharp eye out, just as innocent and vulnerable, as our cruelly separated migrant children imprisoned alone at our southern border in Texas and Arizona, caged and abused and sitting in their own feces, without diapers, blankets, shoes, at border holding facilities, but supplied by Wayfair with furniture for staff. Why, Dad? Why? Thanks for joining us today for a pretty heavy show. And I think my hope is that some Vietnam vets out there will catch this show. Their relatives will tell them about it. Thank you. we're going to do a wrap right now and skip January. So we'll see you at the end of February. Thanks again for joining us. And as I say, all these books are in the Westbrook Library. Thanks. Bye.